Okay, so today we're going to talk about family systems therapy and the different approaches that are available for you if you're going to work with family units. So let's get started. And by way of introduction, we are shifting away from the individual to larger units, right? So when we talk about larger units, it creates more of a focus on interactions. It creates more of a focus on the process of communication. It puts a spotlight on power differentials and whatnot. But when we talk about family systems therapy, there are many different models or approaches. And today we might use some from Bowen, some from Minutian, some from Virginia Satir. There are different models out there, and we might mix and match as we need to for that purpose. But let's talk about it, right? So obviously the target is the family and family systems therapy, not the individual, right? So what is a systems theory, right? So instead of looking at individual components, we look for unifying principles and how individuals operate or entities operate within organizations that they function, right? So when we talk about systems, that we could apply systems to businesses, organizations, but for our purpose, which is why I'm talking about this, we could also apply it to the family unit. And when we look at family systems models, by nature, because you're working with two or more individuals, it is relational. And we believe that a disruptance in one person causes a disruptance in the family unit, and an alleviation of symptoms of one person could create relief for the whole family unit, right? So there are overarching principles that we have with this, right? So one nice thing about looking at family units is no individual is meant to be a scapegoat. Now, you can, in unhealthy families, scapegoat a person, but it's our job to kind of check that, kind of block that, to say, hey, wait a minute, what is your role in reinforcing maladaptive behavior in the family unit as well, right? So it could be that maybe we have an enabler in the family unit. Maybe we have a scapegoat. Maybe we have, someone who's the family advocate and so forth, right? So that's basically where we're at with this, right? So we don't want to pathologize the individual. We don't want to target the individual. We don't want to scapegoat the individual. We want to focus on the unit as a whole and the central factors that create problems with the family. So this isn't new. When we think about looking at a systemic point of view or a holistic point of view, we could think about Alfred Adler, right? So Alfred Adler, he believed in individual psychology, which is studying intrapsychic wholeness, but he also applied this to family dynamics as well. So family dynamics and looking at it from a holistic point of view. And he's responsible for creating somewhere around 30 child guidance clinics in Vienna after World War I. So we see that he was ahead of the curve, so to speak, in working with family units. And then we have Nathan Ackerman in New York. Typically, we consider Nathan Ackerman as our first modern family therapist. And he explored different ways to work with families and included fathers into these interventions, right? Because historically, there was a focus on mother-child relationships, and the father was excluded. But Nathan Ackerman suggested that's not right and brought the father in. And while there are attachments to one's mother, there are also attachments to one's father as well. It looks different, but there are attachments, and bringing the father in was a good choice. And we do that, obviously, we bring the whole family in today. The Ackerman Institute is still around if you're interested in getting training on family systems therapy. That's something you could do. Now, if we were to do some of the, a brief timeline again on family systems therapy, right? So we have social diagnosis from Richmond in 1917, which again goes away from focus on the individual and looks at more of the social climate, the social dynamics, or the interpersonal dynamics. Then we have Alfred Adler and Abraham and Hannah Stone, who had child and couples consultation centers. And then the Ackermans had the Ackerman Institute, and there's the famous The Unity of the Family, which is a great piece to read. Carl Rogers talked about clinical treatment of the problem child, which, it's interesting when you read that. He believed in unconditional positive regard. So he talks about the conditions of worth that parents put on their children and whatnot. And then you have the development of the American Association of Marriage Counseling. Today we call it couples and family counseling because there are couples who choose not to have a family. There are couples who choose not to get married. So it's broader, but nevertheless, this was the foundation. So Kurt Lewin had field theory, which talked about the idea that groups are more than a sum of their parts, and looked at communication patterns, relationships between father and child, mother and child, father and mother, and whatnot. Again, it's still looking at the family unit from a male-female perspective. So we could think about what that means for same-sex couples and whatnot. The principles apply, but the focus was not there in the 1950s, unfortunately. And then by the 70s and 80s, we refer to this as when family systems blossomed, right? So a lot of the major evidence-based perspectives that we're going to talk about really come to fruition in this time period. So that's a very brief spotlight to show you the contributions of many different people along the way. It's true that I don't think that I covered everyone or everything I could have covered, but that's a quick primer. Now, so some theoretical principles. When we pay attention to the whole family system, the whole unit, this idea did not emerge within psychology actually alone. This discussion was happening in other areas of business and machinery and whatnot. So we're going to talk about three different influences towards family systems. So cybernetics, right? When we think about machine or animals, cybernetics refers to a field of control or communication, whether it be a machine, like a computer, or whether it be an animal, right? So when we think about that, it's very interesting, right? That this is coming out of technology, right? Go to Bates, and if you were to take these principles of cybernetics, you would think about cybernetics in machinery, you would think about it in computer software, engineering, and whatnot. But Bateson moved it towards families and communication in families and control within families. And that could be, sometimes the communication style is abrupt, diminishing individuals. It could be passive aggressive. There are many different things. Or it could be a double bind approach where you are given mixed messages, right? So from this principle of double bind communication, we see a theory of schizoprenogenic mothers. So this was one of the early explanations for schizophrenia, is that children are provided these contradictory or mixed messages where they're put in no-win situation. So the mind is torn, it's split, so to speak, right? And in fact, schizophrenia really refers to a split mind, right? So it's kind of torn or pulled in different directions. And so these contradictory messages or no-win situations are the origin or cause of schizophrenia. So in the early 40s, the suggestion was that the mothers cause schizophrenia in their children, whether it be through being overprotective or dominating or given double bind theory. The reality is that there's very limited support for this theory, but the development of understanding of mental health has evolved so much. But you'll see some of the early theories. We look back and we're like, wait, what? So this is just one of those early theories. But it does put the role on the mother, doesn't it? So that's a family dynamic, right? So, and that's why I'm bringing it up here. So from a general systems model, right, we consider the behavior or actions of individuals within the system. So the nuance of human actors, so to speak, on the system. So we look at how an individual's action within a unit impacts that unit, right? So the suggestion is that families operate like organisms, less like machines. Now, why is that important? So a mechanistic approach is kind of like you have an input, you have an output. It's very predictable. But when we look at organisms are adaptive and maladaptive at times. They evolve. There could be rigidity within some systems. There could be fluidity within some systems. So it's not as mechanistic. And that's really the point here, right? So, and if we look at the whole, there are oftentimes smaller parts within the whole. So a family system might have several subsystems or these self-sustaining parts. And that could be, parent-child interactions. That could be parent-parent interactions. That could be child-child interactions. But these subsystems impact the whole. Now, Uri Brunfenbrenner is credited with the development of the ecological systems model. And he suggests that there are different layers of social interactions or systems that help in child development. So you have the child or the individual, and then there's sort of like rings. And as I go further out, these rings get further away from the child or less direct in their influence. So the microsystem, it's your immediate interactions with the child. So the child interacts with their home and everyone in their home. The child interacts with the school. So that would be a setting of interaction, direct interaction. Now, then you have something called a Meso System. Meso means middle. So micro is on a small scale. Meso is on a middle scale or middle layer, so to speak. This is the communication between the various microsystems. So things like communication between the family and the school. There is still direct interaction. Now, when we get to the exosystem, that's a more outer layer, and that does not have direct interaction with the child, but it still can influence the development of the child. What do I mean by that? Your parents' place of work. Very rarely do children interact with their parents' place of work. But if something happens at the workplace, that could affect the child. For example, if a parent gets fired, even though the child did not directly interact with the workplace, that the parent getting fired could impact the child's experience, if that makes any sense. And then when we talk about macro systems, this is sort of the cultural value system of a society. So if we were to think of the United States, we're steeped in very Western value systems, which includes individualism, which includes patriotism, and many other forces that are part of a US value system. And that impacts, the values that the child adopts. And then, of course, there's this kind of three-dimensional approach to this system called the Chrono System, which is cross-cutting. And a Chrono System, the root of Chrono System is chrono or chronicle, which refers to time, right? So a Chrono System says that where we were born, or better yet, when we were born, could impact how we view the world. And that's very important because the whole macro system changes. Our values in the 1930s were different than our values in the 1960s, which are different than our values even today. So the chrono system, or time by which a child is raised, could impact the development of the child. Okay, so that's the ecological systems or ecosystems. So then we have this idea of second order cybernetics, which is just applying cybernetics to itself. So no longer do we view the counselor as an expert observer, right? So they're in the original model or traditional cybernetics, the therapist is looking inward and offering suggestion. But in second order cybernetics, the family counselor becomes participant observers. So they're involved in the process. So they're not passive. All right. So in systems counseling theory, cybernetics and general systems are part of the picture, but here are some things that we need to think about. Circular causality, the identified patient, or what I call the scapegoat. First and second order change, paying attention to process, not just content, and paying attention to homeostasis. So when we think of dialogue, we think of things in terms of linear thinking, logical thinking, very clear, first, then, next, finally. But when it comes to family units, people don't communicate linearly. They can bounce around a lot more, and it's more circular thinking. So one of the important things to consider with circular reasoning is that there really is we're not trying to find a first, then, next, finally, or beginning or end. We're trying to see, well, what is the connection between the factors that are kind of bouncing off of one another, and what factors maintain sets of behavior. So when we talk about first order change, we're directly addressing your symptoms. So, in therapy, if someone says, I'm stressed out, I don't have a job, and you say, well, have you considered going on Indeed? Well, that would be addressing the stress around the job directly. It's superficial. You're not delving deeper as to, well, why don't you have a job? And, I've noticed that you've been out of work 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years. So what might that be about, right? So trying to explore the more underlying patterns of behavior and interaction could be useful. So this is far richer. It requires much more finesse. It requires treating therapy as an art and patience. And there are a lot of things that you need to do to be able to get second order change, but it's much richer. So again, when we talk about circular reasoning, there are also circular patterns. So one person's behavior is impacted or sustained by another person in the family unit. So that's something we acknowledge, right? So each person could impact another. And our family system seeks homeostasis. Believe it or not, even if the homeostasis is considered dysfunctional, in family units, when you push for change, there are people who can feel stressed out because you're going against homeostasis. You're an agent for change, and you're challenging these maladaptive family patterns. But all families want to be in a state of homeostasis. Now, I talked to you about subsystems, right? That could be parent-child interactions. It could be sibling interactions. It could be parent-parent interactions. All of these are subsystems that we attend to. So if the family is, the child is reporting a drop in performance in school, but simultaneously the parents are constantly fighting and screaming in the house, we explore how the dynamic between the parents or the subsystems impact the child's performance in a school potentially, and vice versa, right? So we pay attention to subsystem interactions in that circular process. Boundaries. Now, healthy boundaries, everybody should have healthy boundaries, right? So healthy boundaries are somewhat firm but flexible when they need to be. But we get into problems when there are either boundary crosses or problems in effective boundary setting. So I said boundaries are firm but flexible. If you have rigid boundaries and you're inflexible, that is going to create problems in the system, right? Because for every rule, there are exceptions to the rule. So you can't be, no, this is the way it is, no questions asked, because that creates problems. It's also very cold and authoritarian. Now, we also have the opposite, though, where we have diffuse boundaries, almost as if the boundaries are absent, right? So I said firm but flexible. You don't want to have absent boundaries. So if you have issues of triangulation in the family, that's an issue of diffuse boundaries. If you have alliances and coalitions in the family, that's an example of diffuse boundaries. So yeah, let's talk about it, right? So if you have an alliance is one member of the family positioning themselves relative to another member of the family to support one member, right? So that would be an alliance. Now, this can occur in the form of a coalition where two people are attacking a third. I actually have a client right now, and their family system, there are 3 sisters, and my client has a lot of anxiety, and her 2 sisters have joined together to like bully her, right? And we're talking about in middle adulthood, they're bullying her, and they have joined forces together to kind of attack my client. and that diminishes their relationship with my client, but strengthens their relationship. Now, another common situation is something called triangulation. Triangulation occurs where you bring in a third party to try and resolve conflict between two members of the family, right? And they're trying to resolve it. But the problem with triangulation is if you are that third party that's brought in, you can become the targeted individual who one or both of the original parties could go against. And we see this a lot in the case of people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So we have to be very, very careful with the concept of triangulation. Now, family roles, there is an unwritten or unspoken expectation that people in the family are going to adopt different roles. So who's the sheriff in the family, right? So who exacts law and order, right? Who's the lawyer? Who's the, I would say, defense attorney? Who's the, the advocate for the family, right? And who's the social worker who's making sure the needs of the family are being met? Obviously, these are not all inclusive. There are many other roles that a family can take. Family rules are either clear-cut, spoken, which are overt, or unspoken, which are covert expectations of behavior. So overt rules or spoken expectations might be things like a curfew or bedtime or chores, whereas covert rules are unspoken. So let's say there is corporal punishment happening in the home, child is getting spanked, child goes to school, there might be an unspoken rule of a conspiracy of silence that we just don't talk about that. So what happened? Why do you have this bruise? I don't know, I must have bumped into a wall or whatever. You make excuses because we don't talk about that, right? So there might be unspoken expectations or rules within the family too. So when we think of family systems therapy, there are really 4 different approaches we can look at, and then, a more contemporary model altogether. So Murray Bowen or Bowenian intergenerational family therapy is important. We have Salvador Minutian, who unfortunately passed away in 2018. It was quite sad. Who is responsible for structural family therapy, and Jay Haley, who has strategic family therapy, and then Satir and Whittaker's experiential and humanistic family therapy. So let's go through it. Bowenian therapy is also referred to as intergenerational family therapy. So we look at the impact of parents on children, children on parents. We look at grandparents and whatnot. And we look for patterns of behavior. And I'm going to talk about genograms, but I actually showed a video in an earlier lesson where Summers Flanagan, he was interviewing a kid, and he was like doing this sketch of, okay, well, here's you, here's your brother, here's mom, and he drew this sketch. Well, that sketch is called a genogram. So we can track things like interpersonal conflict, things like divorce, we can mark in this picture, this graph. We can chart generational effects of alcoholism, right? And so forth. So genograms are a nice way of looking at the family unit from an intergenerational approach to identify patterns and whatnot. But we talked about triangulation, adding that third person, right, to kind of resolve conflict between two people. That's not very healthy, right? We also talk about an emotional cutoff. This is where I call it stonewalling, especially in relationships. Like stonewalling is where a person creates, they put up a wall and they become short, distant, removed from another member of the family. And it could be that they're still interacting with the family where they say, yes, things like that, but they're really not, they're just saying as little as they need to. Or it could be in older adult relationships versus child or relationships where you have siblings who don't talk to one another at all, right? So one person might be referred to as, the ostracized one or the black sheep of the family, right? So that one is separate. That would be an emotional cutoff, right? So having very little contact or any at all. We have enmeshment. Enmeshment, this is where, one member of the family overly meddles in another family member's decision-making. So, teenagers and parents get into a lot of conflict because teenagers are trying to find their voice, trying to find their self, trying to figure out who they are, what they want to be. And parents want to be overly involved. So the question is, should a parent be able to weigh in on the romantic relationship of their child or who they should be with, right? So that that in of itself is a problem. And in many Western or individualized nations, the aspiration is for the child to become independent, an independent adult. And this would be considered enmeshment and over-involvement. And I say in Western societies because I'm aware that in non-Western or more collectivistic societies, this is far more common. So in Asia, it's understood that one's parents are going to give you a blessing to marry someone. Or in Africa, it's understood that one's parents going to give you a blessing to marry someone or not. And in non-Western cultures, if your family says you can't marry that person, they don't give the blessing, then you don't marry them, right? And that's a source of conflict in many traditional cultures between the parent and the child. The child may adhere because it's a rule, right? A family rule, but that doesn't mean that they're happy. Whereas in Western societies, kids are more likely to violate their parents' person who they say, don't marry this. They're going to be like, I found love, and they're going to go in whatever direction their heart takes them. But in both cases, this over-involvement of one member of the family could cause distress to another member of the family, if that makes sense, right? So we call it enmeshment because it's not clear where the boundary of one person's sense of self ends and another begins. They're kind of fused together. So that's a problem. So we have to work on that and explain, identify healthy boundaries. So I already talked about figuring out the independent self versus the interdependent self. And I already talked about genograms, right? So the goal, right? And I know this is in relational psychoanalysis as well. So this is not just intergenerational family therapy, but the goal should be that a person has the ability to self-regulate and work towards the differentiation of the self, which means to become an independent body, an independent person. So there's a separation and individuation process that is required. But from a family systems model, it's a delicate balance between your independence and the family cohesion, right? So the goal should be that you become separate and independent, but still be connected to the family in a healthy way. So how does the therapist work in this model, right? So first, you're a detective, you're an investigator trying to figure out, well, what's going on. And then after you have identified the aspects of the family system that seem to perpetuate problems, then you become a coach or a guide to help family members move towards differentiation or individuation from a more relational psychodynamic perspective. So here are things that we do. We use the intergenerational family interview to gather information about the family and problems within the family system and challenges that one member of the family might have with another member of the family and so forth. So there's this kind of interview to see, okay, well, how do the parents get along? How do the siblings get along? How do the parent and the children get along? And if you were to say, well, what are the source of the problems in your family? We take information from each individual in the family about their perspective on where the sources of the problems are and what sustains it, right? So that's an intergenerational family therapy interview. You're focusing on what causes or sustains a problem. And then, as you're listening, you might draw boxes and circles. Boxes are oftentimes for males and circles are for females. And then we have lines that are drawn for relationships between these individuals. And we have positioning on equal footing versus below for generations. And then we could note any kind of alliance or coalition, any triangles, enmeshment, cutoffs, addictions. I talk about alcoholism. We note death with an X. We note conflict with like a jagged line. We note divorce. I note divorce with dashed lines, so there are different ways that you can draw the family system and try and see what's going on. And as the interview's taking place, you could have the whole family unit, 3-4 generations with one picture, and you can know exactly how to conceptualize the issue. So that moves us to Salvador Minutian. Salvador Minutian, he focused on issues like boundaries and hierarchies, right? So it was more about a family structure. So who has the power in the family? And the goal is to help the person who has the power in the family to share the power with other members of the family. And the person who feels disempowered to develop more power, right? So that should be one of the goals. So we're trying to identify power and boundaries. And if there are problems related to power and boundaries, we work on that. So the goal is to create newer, healthier behavior. And it's interesting that this model is pretty sensitive to cultural differences. So you would take some time to try and understand the value system of the family and the assumptions of the roles within the family before you take action, right? So each family might have their own unique way of relating, but it might be a violation through a Western eye, but it might not be a violation from a non-Western eye. So you have to be very careful. You have to be very sensitive. You have to work towards bonding with your clients and developing a sense of trust So really, if you want to help the system become more effective, then you have to help each member of the system blossom. So that's why we need to know about the communication styles, the power differentials and boundaries, because helping one individual grow is going to help the family grow, right? So nurturing the individuals results in collective growth. So when we talk about facilitating change, we can look at different steps. So the first thing is mimesis, which is joining the family, trying to make efforts to fit in within the family, right? And that really, that's delicate, right? Because you might think of your therapist as somehow, disconnected, but not in this model. They're trying to join with the family. Then you're trying to understand the family. So you do family mapping. Well, who plays what roles? What are the assumptions, both explicit and implicit? And then the family enactments. So whatever the problems are, we have to identify what enactments are at play, what conflicts and what outcomes emerge. So here's where we get to see family dysfunction. And then, the goal is to not just leave the family in a state of enactment or dysfunction. The goal is to restructure and rebalance the family. So you could do that through reframing, intensifying, unbalancing. Now, when we talk about, unbalancing, it's interesting because I said everyone likes homeostasis, but you're getting people off balance with their enactments, right? So that would be the delicate, right? So the therapists themselves are very directive. They're very involved. And I talked to you about working with the family as part of the family, fitting in with the family to try and identify ineffective strategies and, try and address them. So what are some patterns we see in the family that are issues, right? So one is knowing that you need to act, but not doing so. So there's a disconnect between the identification and a problem and what you're doing, or needing to stop acting. So now this is where you're engaging in maladaptive behavior and knowing you need to stop that, such as excessive drinking or drug use, right? But not stopping. Or trying to solve a problem, but the solution doesn't address the underlying issues. So it's kind of superficial problem solving. So the level is ineffective. These are very common things we see as ineffective strategies. So what do we do? How do we address this? Now, you might see some of these are consistent with REBT, rational emotive behavioral therapy, and some of the existential models that we talked about. But at this point, there is a recycling of ideas. So using paradox. So that is intended to disrupt patterns that keep the problem active, right? So pulling to the opposite. Prescribing the symptom, right? So encouraging the person to feel more deeply or do more frequently the problematic behavior. So you're actually encouraging the symptom to manifest or draw it out because it creates greater awareness of the problem, right? Or the ordeal, right? So this is where the therapist describes how they see the problem and what's overshadowing the problem. So you can have many problems and have something overshadow it. So that becomes the larger ordeal. And then positioning. Now, this is delicate, right? Because if you have members of the family who have a personality disorder, positioning could be very, very challenging, right? So if you support one member of the family's position and then take a more extreme position than that member of the family, and there are other individuals in the family unit who are in opposition of that, and they are diagnosed with a personality disorder, you can become vilified. There's deification and vilification. You have to be very careful not to become vilified. But assuming that that's not at play, you can say, yeah, I see your position, and in fact, a more extreme position to get people active so that they could say, no, that's not what I mean, right? So you could pull them back. And these are just strategies to kind of draw attention to the problem, get the person to think on a larger level. And, this is meant to uproot maladaptive patterns. So now let's talk about Virginia Satir and Carl Whittaker. They're very, very influential in humanistic and experiential movement of family therapy. I would tell you Virginia Satir, she's also very involved in feminist models of therapy. So she's really fantastic. So in this model, counselors are encouraged to pay attention to their own experience, their own emotions, right? And as you interact with families, being authentic with the family about your experience, right? My experience with this is ... is useful. So it's very humanizing, right? So it's very, very, some of the boundaries that are put up from therapists to clients are reduced. So you're very much present and in the room with your clients, and you're very willing to share your experience, right? So this model also acknowledges intuition as a source of change. Now, from a scientific point of view, we know that intuition does not always lead to accurate interpretations, right? So our gut can be wrong. However, that does not mean that it's always wrong. So it can spark an idea or spark a source of change, right? So working in tandem is another model where you have co-therapists having multiple eyes. You see this a lot in group therapy too, where you have co-facilitators, but there might be multiple therapists paying attention to the family dynamic. So you have multiple sets of eyes and ears that are present in the room with the family. This is something I don't do. I don't do the working in tandem, but I can see its value. I have worked in tandem in group therapy, but not for family systems. All right, so what are the various types of communication patterns? And every communication pattern has a goal. Now, I'm going to tell you that having a congruent communication style is the best. That's what we're aiming for. But there are other communication patterns which are kind of designed to remove oneself from the problem or somehow separate the need to address the problem. So, placating. When a person has a placating sense of self, they're more self-deprecating, right? No, so it puts everyone above them and puts them in a position of powerlessness, right? So, that perpetuates power differentials that are problematic. Blaming is more of deflecting responsibility to other people. That's pretty clear cut. I'm not the problem in the family. You're the problem in the family, these kind of things. When in reality, we said the family unit, we look at it from a circular or more holistic point of view, So this isn't useful. So then you have these super reasonable people who can communicate in very logical, calm, or intellectualized senses, but they're doing it to excuse themselves from needing to address other factors within the family or uncontrollable factors. So it's kind of this over intellectualization to avoid having to deal with the uncontrollable factors and addressing the work that needs to happen. So irrelevant communication. So they might have distractors. They might bring up unrelated topics to bring the focus away from either themselves or the family or the work at play. So these are the 4 communication styles that are very, very problematic. But being congruent is one where you're genuine, you're authentic, you're sensitive, you're clear in expressing your inner experience while honoring and respecting other people in the room. That's the goal. If we can get the family to speak their lived experience while respecting others, that would be a congruent communication style. But how many times do you see, and I think of Thanksgiving when I talk about this, when families get together, family dynamics are at play all the time. Just watch. You'll see how different subsystems interact with one another, and you'll see some of these communication patterns at work, and some of the unhealthy communication patterns at work. So there's this unwritten rule that you might have your family over for like 2 or 3 general meals for holidays and not interact with them otherwise, right? So you go home for the holidays, so to speak, but you're prepared mentally for some of these unhealthy communication styles. So if you're in family therapy, the goal would be to move you away from placating, blaming, intellectualization, or irrelevant conversation to becoming more congruent, right? So that's pretty much our strategy. We might call attention to it. We might explain that some of this is what goes on, and we'll go from there. So now, when we work with the family, there's this direct experiencing, right? So that is an agent of change, working towards people changing. And we engage in something called family sculpting, which is guiding or molding the family. But in order to do this, you need to get the buy-in of the family. They have to acknowledge or agree that it's possible for them to be moldable. So you might ask, do you feel that this family is where it wants to be? And then usually if you're in therapy, the answer is no, right? And then the question becomes, well, okay, so the family's not where it needs to be. Do you feel like the family could be eventually where you want it to be? And then most families are going to say yes. So if they say yes to that second question, it's like, okay, then we have work to do. And we're going to work together on reshaping or remolding the family in the image of what the family wants to become. Okay. So then we have this more contemporary model, which is called functional family therapy, or FFT, which takes from behavioral therapy, takes from many of the other previous systems, multi-systems model, and applies it to a whole host of issues, things like violence, drug abuse, criminality, oppositional defiance in the classroom. All of these things we work with functional family therapy. So we try and understand how people view their interpersonal relationships, how people create or maintain intimacy or closeness, and how people develop meaning or meaningful life experiences. That's very important. So it's a very pragmatic approach, okay, let's solve the practical problem that we're trying to deal with. So it tends to be a very strength-based model, which it's not meant to be critical. It's meant to set goals, identify the problem, or label the problem, then set goals, and then relabel the problem, right? So the approach is not highly critical. It's kind of like, okay, well, let's see what's going on here. There's curiosity, there's non-judgment, and say, well, we're going to treat this from more of an experimental approach. We're going to tinker with this. Can we try to explore different behavioral strategies and see where they go? So it's very, very much tentative, and it's from a tinkering approach or a curious researcher approach. So instead of blaming, we try and understand the behavior, and we try and relabel how people view the problem so that people can become more sensitive and understanding to one another. So now there's also a multidimensional family therapy, which acknowledges the interaction between the individual, the family, and the environment, right? So when you see families go awry, it could be due to communication. It could be due to relationship conflict. It could be due to something going on at school, or whether it be violence or interpersonal, whether it be achievement-based. It could be legal issues. It could be that the child doesn't have the social skills. So what are we doing? We're assessing the various domains: your home life, your school life, your social life, your legal experience. So we're trying to get a fuller picture and address the wholeness of the problem, right? So we're going to have the child, oftentimes a teenager, interact with the parent. We're going to look at them individually, and we're going to look at the factors outside of the family. And all of these come together to promote growth. So that's a multi-dimensional families model, multi-dimensional family model. Okay, that's better. And then we have a multi-systemic therapy, right? So this is based on Uri Brunfenbrenner's model of those 6 layers of interaction. And this tends to be fairly short term, but high intensity. So you might have therapy going on for 3 to 6 months. You don't want to grow old with your clients, right? But it's intensive. So you're expecting 60 to 100 hours of contact in those 3 to 6 months so that we can address it. So it's a far more intense model. So what is the research on this? Well, we tend to see that Bowenian approaches are credited for their depth of analysis, so that's great. And then in terms of structural family therapy, there have been some research studies that have indicated that it works for substance abuse, psychosomatic conditions, conduct disorder. We talked about oppositional defiance in the classroom. And then there's multi-systems and multi-dimensional family therapy. Really, that's where a lot of the research is at and suggesting support. So these are the more contemporary approaches. Now, in terms of cultural sensitivity, we do see that as it relates to Salvador Minutian and structural family therapy, there's tremendous sensitivity, cultural sensitivity. That's great. We see with Virginia Satir and the humanistic or experiential approach that authenticity or genuineness was important there, and empathy was important. So you see tremendous potential for cultural sensitivity there. So, and the multi-systems model as well. So long story short, that family systems models are very good or can be very good at cultural sensitivity. Now, in terms of gender-related issues, we no longer blame schizophrenic, parents or whatever it is. We don't blame moms for causing schizophrenia to their children. That's not where we are. We also notice, remember how we're talking about the mother, the father, the children, that there was a spotlight on the more traditional family units and family structures and roles. However, that is changing. So there is more focus on, I want to say, starting in the late 90s, early 2000s, there's more of a focus on LGBTQ sensitivity in the family unit. Now, that is pretty much our lecture. I'm going to talk about spirituality and I'm going to show you a video, but let me talk about spirituality first, actually. Spirituality, religion and spirituality was chucked from most therapy. And I think it's a mistake. But in the 90s, we started to bring it back. In other models, we actually started to see religion and spirituality come back in the 60s and 70s. Like, so when we talk about Rogers, right? Rogers and the humanistic movement, there was a lot of focus on religion and spirituality. Now, but religion has expectations on the family too. So it truly was a mistake to extract the family from the religious value system. So it's been put back, and we can use religion as a source of distress if there's a conflict between religion and practice, or, which is how I do it, I use religion as a source of potential strength in the family unit and how faith can be harnessed. So we are living, breathing systems, interacting with one another, developing patterns of behavior and relationships with one another. And our goal is to identify the complexity of the family and facilitate growth and change. So I'm going to stop share there, and I'm going to pull up the video. Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at an approach towards family systems therapy. So let's see how it goes.
This next session is an example of family counseling using a family systems approach. Our colleague, Dr. Kirsten Murray, is the counselor, and she obviously loves doing counseling with families, and she's also a published author in this area.
One thing about family systems work is it's similar to feminist theory in that it places the origin or the roots of the problem outside of the individual, in this case, generally systems, mostly the family system. And so the focus for the family therapist is on, if we can change some of the interactions or the dynamics in the system, we can then address the symptoms that are manifest in specific individuals in the family.
Right, which makes total sense. In the upcoming video, Kirsten is able to use a number of strategies, but she uses the family structure and some family sculpting to facilitate some very genuine emotional communication in the family.
So let's see how that works.
Yeah.
Beth, can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to watch Braden and Tanner bicker, or what you see?
Yeah, I guess I know that it happens. I mean, I argued with my brother, and we did things to annoy one another, and I think similar with Jake's family. So we know that it's part of having a sibling, but it just seems, I guess in my mind, I just would like them to appreciate one another and enjoy being together at least sometimes. And it just seems like, you know, they are always looking for something to say negative about each other.
Okay. So for you, as you talk, I think you just want a little bit of peace.
Right. Just let's get along for a little bit during the day.
Okay.
Right.
So, Brayden, sneaky Brayden. Now, was that like a small example of what you guys do to each other just now? Yeah. All right. So I wonder, Brayden, what did you hear your mom say?
What? We're looking for something negative to say to each other?
Yeah, do you agree with her that you think a lot about negative things to say with Tanner?
Yeah, because there's not very many positives.
You even found a negative thing to say just now. I know. And you have a really big smile when you say it too, like you're kind of proud of being so sneaky. Okay. Tanner, you're loaded and ready to go too.
He doesn't have anything positive. Woo!
Guys, it's not a competition to see who can
What it is,
say
Dad.
the most
What
negative.
it is.
Well, that's probably what we need to work
Yeah.
on.
So do you agree now, I mean, when you're watching them say negative things back and forth to each other, what's it like for you?
Well, they're just kind of joking right now, but
Sure.
they are very critical of each other, so they're always looking for things to point out
Yeah.
that the other is doing wrong,
Okay.
which in some cases is okay because I kind of have them monitor each other in certain circumstances to make sure they're safe and doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of take it to extreme and things that really don't matter. They're just looking for opportunities to pick at each other.
Okay. When you get annoyed, where do you feel it in your body? It might be kind of a strange question at first. So like when I get annoyed, I can feel tenseness in my shoulders, like my shoulders start to feel like they're connected to my ears, or my stomach tightens up, or I might make more fists with my hands.
Probably the shoulders.
Your shoulders, yeah. Tanner, when you get annoyed, where do you feel it in your body? In your head?
I feel it in my face because he slapped me.
I high five your face.
No, he slapped me.
A high five.
He slapped me.
Like, you move your hand so it goes, hey!
So, Brayden, you feel annoyed sometimes too? Yeah. Are you feeling especially annoyed right now, Tanner, because you just lost your pen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love my special pink one too.
You liked it a lot.
But at least I got my faces.
I wonder if there's little pieces that you guys might actually like being around each other. Even if annoying each other is kind of fun sometimes. It is? Okay.
It can be.
It can be.
I'm pretty sure it's the same for him.
Do you think Tanner's right? Is it the same
Probably
for you?
fun for him.
Okay.
You annoy me too.
I'm going to stop you for
He
a second.
tackle me when I'm brushing my teeth every night.
Brayden, the more that you talk and that you say that it's fun for him, I wonder if there's part of you sometimes that feels a little hurt by the way that Tanner picks on you.
Sort of.
Sort of. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I don't know. I don't really know much about it.
Much about it. Sometimes you never feel sad after he teases you or high fives your face.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. That must feel pretty lonely sometimes. Yeah. I wonder, would you guys be willing to try something with me? It's a little different. It's called a family sculpt. Okay. So you know how you can sculpt things out of clay? Okay. This game is how you can sculpt something out of a family. You ready to try it with me?
Pretty much clay.
It's like your clay, right? And you can sculpt the way you feel or how you think it is in your family. And I'm wondering if you'd let me try and sculpt you first. Would that be okay? And Brandon, I'm going to ask you especially because I was wondering if I could sculpt an example of sometimes when you feel alone or hurt after Tanner picked on you.
You sure would do that? He gets me back when I'm walking away. He always jump.
And you know what?
He's a monkey.
We'll give you a chance to sculpt your family too. Okay. But Brain, you want to go first?
You know how.
I will help you.
Okay.
You trust me to help you?
Okay.
Okay? All right. So we are going to give that a try. Okay? So first, let's stand up. This is for everybody. Oh, come on, guys. Okay. And we're going to try and stay right in this area for the sculpt. Okay? And you and me, we're going to work together. Okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is, I'm going to get down here so I can talk to you like this. So you were talking to me before about sometimes when Tanner picks on you that it can hurt sometimes. Yeah.
Because he punches me.
So it can hurt like outside, like on your body. Do you ever also feel sad sometimes inside?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when I was first talking to you, sometimes that can feel like you're pretty alone. And if I were thinking of a way that alone might look, if I sculpt it, I might just kind of want to sit on the ground like this by myself. Does that feel right to you? Is that one way alone looks?
Yeah.
Is there another way that you had in mind?
Not really.
Not really? Okay, do you want to come down here and sit on the floor with me like this? Okay. Alright, so my next question for you is, when you're feeling alone and your feelings are kind of hurt, what does Tanner do?
Comes over and punches me more.
Okay, so
What?
sometimes
Oh, he tackles me.
we're just going to do this
Starts
from,
pulling my ears.
Okay.
And my hair.
so we're going to do this from the way that Brayden sees it, and then we'll do it a way that Tanner sees it, okay? So nobody gets to argue with you, all right? This is how you see it, okay? All right, so Tanner, one thing I'm going to have you do is come tower over Brayden like you're going to pick on him, but you can't touch him, okay? And it's tempting to be silly. Can I help you? You can stay face that way like you're alone. Or look alone. He won't. All right, can I touch you? Yeah. All right, so sometimes when I think about, like, do you ever feel angry when you're picking on Brayden? Like you're really annoyed?
Yeah.
So when you're angry, how's that look in your body? For me, sometimes it looks like this. I do this, I put my hand, but this is like a mom kind of angry, right?
Or
Or a grandma kind of angry like this. You're absolutely right. So
That's
when,
the earphone thing.
yeah, right?
We made it up called the granny in the hair. That's called the grandpa.
This is the grandpa?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll remember that. That's a
And this
pretty
is
good
the
move.
angry grandpa.
And then this is the grandma who doesn't know what they're
So what's angry look like for you?
No.
Okay, so, but you can't touch him, but you can stand
Ow.
over him like this.
Like
Okay. You stay there like kind of over here. Okay, and I just want you to try and freeze. All right. Okay, you're doing it. Feeling angry. I have another question for you. When this is happening, what does mom do? Or what's mom doing? Mom's studying. Okay. So I'm going to put mom over here in a chair like she's studying. Okay. All right. So Beth, I'm going to put you with your back here and sit like you're studying and paying really close attention to all that homework. Okay. And then what does Dad do?
he's usually
Working on the computer.
Dad's working on the computer. Okay, all right. So, Dad. Over here. Working on the computer. He also takes a shower sometimes. I would hope so.
Every day.
Oh, once a week.
So even though this can feel a little silly right now, the next thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is just feel how you're feeling. Okay, so if you're supposed to be feeling lonely, let yourself feel lonely. If you're feeling angry, let yourself feel angry. Imagine that you just did something that's so annoying. Okay, and you're standing right over the top of them. And I'm just going to have you hold in your positions for a minute. When you look around and see how your family is right now, is this kind of what it's like sometimes when you're being picked on? Yeah,
Most of the time.
most of the time. What's most right about how we sculpted your family? What's it like for you to see your mom and dad turned away like that?
Sort of normal.
Sort of normal, okay. Do you feel a little more lonely?
Sort of.
Sort of, okay. All right. Mom, what's it like for you right now to sit like this? Yeah. Can you tell me what's most uncomfortable about
I think just as far as being here or hearing kind of all of it, I think, because you just hate to hear, him say that, that makes him more lonely. And of course, then knowing that I have been super busy and, there's been a lot to do. And I mean, and I know that, and I've already kind of had that guilt anyway.
Yeah.
So that's definitely uncomfortable.
Yeah, this makes the guilt a lot
Right.
more real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
From what we've already seen, Kirsten has used modeling and joining and some family sculpting to elicit lots of different responses from the family. She also set some limits at various points.
Yeah, she did. And it was interesting for me to see how much emotion came up for the family members when she was doing the sculpt.
That is amazing. Just by moving people, having them move each other around a room and having them talk produces these strong emotional reactions.
Yeah. And in the next one, we see her do some more sculpting, moving people around and letting other people have some control so that everybody kind of gets a chance to have that experience. Let's watch.
Well, who would you feel is safest talking to about it now?
Maybe Mom.
Maybe Mom? All right, so it sounds like you would want to be close with Mom. How can we sculpt you to show that you're close with Mom? You're going to wait at her? Mom, do you have any ideas of how you would want to show Brayden that you're close with him?
What if I turn my chair and you come sit with me?
Okay.
Both fit?
What's this? How's this feel?
Good.
Good.
But that's really good to me.
Yeah, can you say more?
Yeah.
Because it seems like you were kind of craving wanting
Yeah,
to do that.
just, sorry, I can't say much.
It's okay. You just be with him.
What?
Oh,
It's really touching you right now.
yeah, because, to hear him say that he's lonely or sad and feels like I'm not there. So,
You have a big smile on your face.
it's good to have him right here.
What would your smile say if it could talk?
This feels really good.
Really good. Yeah. Now what? We got to figure out what the heck we're going to do with these two, right?
How would we put them?
Would it be far away from you or close to you?
Mm-hmm.
If he cared about you, Braden.
It'd be closer.
Closer. Can we put them right next to you right here?
Sure.
Okay. So Tanner, why don't we stand you here? All right. And would he be touching you if he was feeling close with you? In a nice way? No.
Nice way, Tanner.
No. Face high fives?
No, face high fives. How would that be for you?
Does that feel right for you? Tanner, what's that like to touch him on his shoulder like that?
Kind of afraid he's gonna hit me, but
Doesn't look like it.
I feel like this arm is gonna go.
So you're a little on the protective, but you're willing to trust him right now. You're willing to trust him. So he's trusting you that you're going to take care of him. And it kind of looks like you want to take care of him too. Yeah. You have a really big smile on your face.
Yeah, this is just much more comfortable.
Is this some of the peace that you...
Yeah, and it's just nice to, get a little glimpse of maybe some of what they really feel but don't necessarily express. So,
yeah. All right, Tanner. So when you think about how you want it to be in your family, first of all, where would you like to be in our sculpt? In the middle, okay? So why don't you stand right here and this can be our middle. All right. Now when you think about how you want your family to be, who do you want to add in next? Do both your parents at the same time. Okay, can you tell them where you would want them?
right here.
Those were some pretty descriptive words, Tanner.
Beside. Okay.
Okay, so with arms. All right. Oh, you want to be able to, do you want to stand on a chair so you can reach them?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Can he have a crown too?
You know, if I had props, I would know. All right. What's that like to be a little taller? Yeah. You want it to be like your. All right. Now, we've got one more to add in. Where should we put Brayden?
Right there.
Behind you. Okay. All right. You ready to
Standing on the floor behind you or going up here? Oh, in the chair. Yeah.
So he's not quite taller than me, but he's still here.
He's still there. So,
I'm taller. I'm almost as tall as Dad.
Tanner, what's important to you about being tall?
Well, I can see more of what's going on in the house.
Oh, okay.
Braden,
But we gotta
be down here.
stay how Tanner put us. He was really good staying how you put him.
Yeah.
So you like being able to know everything that's going on.
Everything but more.
More. Okay.
Yeah. How do you know?
Pretty wise. Okay.
More than
So
what's
you
going
want to know more about what's going on. What else do you like about being up there with your arms around your family?
Well, it makes me feel closer to my family
Yeah.
than it sometimes is.
Yeah. So sometimes did you feel alone the way that Braden said he felt alone? It's just good to be reminded that you're surrounded by people that love you. Yeah. I like that feeling. It's like getting a big hug. All right, why don't we unsculpt and sit down?
Person's chair. Yeah, Brady.
You want to swap chairs with me? We can. All right.
Hey, can I have the paper?
So we're almost to the end of our time. And before I end, I always like to ask everybody what they're leaving with after our time together. like if you learned anything new or experienced anything new. Just curious what you're gonna go home with.
Well, my brother likes me a little more than I thought he did. And I found out that mom and dad feel a little bit guilt. Well, mom does. She feels a little bit guilty that she has to study all the time, and she's not around. Well, she's still around, but
it's hard for her. You know that it's hard for her, and she really wants to be with you. Yeah. What'd you learn about your dad?
that he wants to have a stick.
Sticks are easy to find.
So maybe the same thing rings true with your dad. That you guys like to tease each other. Yeah. Is that one way that you show your dad that you love him? Yeah.
John, I think this was a masterful example of Kirsten using family systems to work with this family. And I have to say, I was really impressed with the family and the courage of the family members to really allow her to do the sculpting and to feel the feelings they felt. It was really very moving.
Yeah. I think Kirsten is very talented in the area, and the family was very impressive too. I think in the end, as we are kind of looking to the future, the family in this experience had more family cohesion and maybe some insights about the way they interact. And I think both of those things will be positive forces and factors as the family travels through time together in the future.
I agree.
Okay, so it's interesting. Every time I watch that, I'm reminded about how visceral the mom gets when in the family sculpt. Now, I actually don't move people that way, but that is the traditional family sculpt where you create a sculpture of your interaction. And the most powerful thing was when the mom was faced the opposite way. You could see as she was listening to her son describe his loneliness, she did not like hearing that. So there's tremendous insight that can be had from these kind of sculpts. It's powerful, and it's interesting. It tells you that you can be physically in the room in different ways, right? So when we did the empty chair, we had the person switching chairs and moving around, and with the family sculpt, posturing and positioning. You don't have to be laying down looking afar like in the movies, and how you have that Freudian couch. You could be sitting, you could be interacting, you could be doing stuff. And there are a lot of different forms of therapy that look like what you just saw, where there's an interaction, especially when you have kids, because you have to keep their attention. So I think that's a good place to stop, and we'll continue next time. All right, take care, everybody.